What's up, slackers? Got some LN2 going right now. This time it's going to be for the whiskey. It's about time to properly set up the cup. So what I usually do is I'll throw some distilled water in there with the whiskey because I like a nice little ice cube, but I make my ice cube in the whiskey. There's nothing better than making that. So this is going to be the first part of the Apex motherboard series where we're going to do CPU overclocking, memory overclocking on air, water, and then we're going to do LN2. So we're probably going to do multiple memory guides because there's different memory out there and they require different guides. So let's get into the thing, get into it. So what we're going to do now is basically, before we get started off on CPU clocking, and I'm going to keep you in suspense a little bit. But the first thing we got to talk about is, so when we're going to cool it, what are we going to use it for air and water? So right now I'm putting it on an AIO cooler. I'm going to do it with you guys in about 2 seconds. But so we're going to end up having a build coming on that we're going to do online that's going to be like a whole test water bench setup and stuff in the future. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to use one of the new Corsairs, or actually it's a little bit of older model, but it works pretty good. It's the Corsair H115i. Now we're going to take it a little bit step further because you know me, I like to overclock, but I like to overclock everything. Cars, motorcycles, coolers, processors, stuff like that. So what we're going to add to the mix is some nice Noctua fans. So these usually come with 2 fans, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to do a push-pull where we're going to do with 4 of these bad boys. So these 4 bad boys, these are 3000 RPM fans. We also got a little connector. So this will be so like the noise doesn't make us go crazy. This is a controller where I can set it up to one of the pins and then control it from the motherboard itself. So that way if it's getting too loud or, I don't know, just so we can control it a little bit. Because these things going fast, they're pretty damn hardcore. I think these 4 are probably more expensive than the cooler itself. So, I don't know. I guess let's get started, right? So, ooh, good whiskey. Ah, much better. Tastes really good in the cup, too. So, let's open this up. See what we got here. Let's see. We're not going to need these because we got some badass ones. So, let's get ready to pull this puppy out. All right. So you can see it's brand new. Got all the guides, all that goodies. Put that down out of the way. Let's see. We got a bunch of screws. Let's see. Zip ties, holder. And here we go. We got the mount, right? So the first thing we're going to do is pop this little top. Now, even on GPUs or anything, I never use the default paste. You'll hear me say all the time, especially with graphic cards, that no matter what, just clean them off, take off the cooler, redo them, because a lot of the times at the factory they do a junk job. And personally, this stuff's not good enough for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our infamous blue paper towels. Now, I get many people asking why to use blue versus the other ones, because these ones are like the heavy duty. I mean, you could use these for like dishwashing and they still won't like die or anything like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab one of the paper towels and we're going to use CRC electronic cleaner. Now this stuff is badass. Now I see all these people on forums and stuff when they want to clean, I don't know, they've got stuff in the socket, I don't know, they all complain, they're trying to use toothbrushes and toothpicks and all a bunch of crap. But all you really need to use is this stuff. You can basically spray it away. You don't even need to put anything in the socket. You just spray this stuff and it automatically just goes away. So like you'll see right here when I spray it. So see right there. All you have to do is do a little bit of wipe. Oop, need a little bit more. I'm trying to show you it's making it a little bit harder. So let's try it again. The more you spray, the more you just gets rid of it. So, and you'll see how pretty it is. Look at that. See how easy was that, huh? So even when you get pasted in the socket, this stuff you can get at pretty much your local Walmart. It's cheaper there. I mean, you can get them at hardware stores, but they tend to jack up the price. So just giving you a little pro tip. Stuff's great to have. I use it pretty much with everything, cleaning memory slots and all sorts of stuff. So it's good stuff to have. All right, so the next thing we have is we got to clean my existing chip, right? So this one is a 9900K. It's a pretty good chip. Does 5.2 R15. Does almost about 6.9 on liquid nitrogen. So it's pretty badass. So you can tell here, I haven't actually tested it since I lapped it. So the theory with the soldered IHS is that we should get better contact, especially with liquid nitrogen, because then we don't have to worry about paste underneath cracking. But what happens with the solders, I find, especially on the bigger chips, is that it kind of warps the IHS a little bit more. So we end up lapping the chip to make sure that it has good contact. And I highly recommend it, but obviously, of course, it's going to go through and mess up your warranty too. So if you don't have the cojones to do it, then don't try it. So let's clean it off. It doesn't have to be too clean, just a little bit. Make sure the back is nice and clean. Go over a little wipe. Again, the CRC spray is pretty much killer. There we go. So that's done, huh? Usually what I'll do is I'll put a little swipe on there and clean it off. So it's pretty, so pretty. If you don't notice, I'm wearing one of the new shirts. The store should be up at least by this end of the week, or maybe next week. So you know, I got like red, gold. They look badass. So you'll see them on the store. They're pretty badass. So make sure you check them out. Okay, so the next part is we're gonna mount this puppy, right? So you gotta go through all the goodies that they give you. Let's see. So back. Let's move this out of the way. First, get some whiskey. And drop my cup holder. Oh, another whiskey. Makes it go by way quicker. So, let's take this. So you see by the Corsair, it's basically just a plastic mount. Pretty easy to put. Just plop it down. You got to make sure it's aligned though for the smaller socket, because this can be used on. I use the similar one on the X299 all the time with the 9980 XE when I do initial testing. The trick is here, I want to show you guys what we do as ventures. So before we put it on liquid nitrogen, we got to go through good testing to make sure that our setup's not messed up or everything's working as it should, because you don't want to be testing on liquid nitrogen, wasting all the good juice. Alright guys, so it's kind of funny about this. So we got to apply paste, but this is actually Kimpin in a grizzly tube, so I figure I'd troll a little bit. Why not, right? So what I do is I usually use Nex. I know people will probably complain and say it's too much, blah, blah. I've tested this many times, and this works properly. And if we can ever get too much paste, you know what we do? We use CRC and clean it up. So you'll see, it's a nice, pretty X. Good enough for me. So, let it sit for a bit, and finish up this side. Alright, so what we're going to do a push-pull setup. So we'll pretty much have it like this. So let's take it so it pulls like this. What I like to do is keep the cables next to each other. They have a little soundproofing, so it's like a sound dampening, so a vibration, so that way it doesn't create more noise than it needs to. Go through these. We'll just put in 2 on each. We don't need to go too hardcore. It's more about the air pushing, air volume than anything. Get the trusty screwdriver out. Pretty much the only thing you really need for PC work is a Phillips head, but sometimes it's a little bit, sometimes for the socket change you need a little, like a hex or whatever the heck it's called. I can't remember the name of it. So, other than that, you pretty much get away with a standard Phillips head. So, you want to be careful. You don't want to hit too tight and go right into the rad. So I'm just gonna do it pretty decently tight, not too much. Then we'll take the other one. What we're gonna do is gonna keep the wires close to each one, so that way when we wire it up, because they're all gonna go to that little controller. So if we keep it similar, now this should give us enough cooling to play around and do at least what we need to do. So we're done with that side. Let's do the other side. Make sure trying to get everything caught. Look at that, we're already getting stuff caught. And we do this side. Alright, so we do push-pull. Like this. Of course, they only give you a certain amount of screws, so that's one of the reasons why we did it. So they only give you screws for the one side, but we want to do both sides. So what we'll do is we'll use this for the CPU guide, so how you guys can get 5 gig plus. How to find a good chip. We call that like silicon lottery. Move this a little bit this way so I can see. There we go. And one last one. Again, we'll orient it like the other ones. So that way we can put all the cables together and nice and organized. Everybody loves organized cables, I know I do. Because otherwise I'll trip over them or do something, pull it out and break it. These big mitts I got. Almost done. Tighten them all up. Make them a little snug, don't over tighten, you want to be careful. So now, you see, we get all 4 cables next to each other. So what we can do is take our little device, right? This controller is pretty cool. What we'll do is allow you to set using one, and it will control all the fans by using that one. So what we could do is then we'll attach, for power you attach it to like a, SATA power. And then you just plug it into, I don't know, we'll probably put the pump. I think this one has a pump and a separate one for the different channels, and that way you can control. So now all you have to do is plug this in, and we can control all 4. So let's finish it putting it together. Let's move the apex over. Notice I have it on some foam sheet. I do the same thing with liquid nitrogen. We don't really need a case at the moment. Usually I have something underneath to keep the power supply, but just pop it down. Make sure there's no cables underneath. Can't tell you how many times I go through when I put this on and then the cable's underneath. So we're all clean under there. What we're gonna do is just pop this on. So that's on. Usually I go back and forth to make sure the puppy's on there. But a lot of times you can see when you're twisting it, the X takes out the air and it will literally like suction to the actual chip itself. Usually with that LN2 pot, I'll pick up the board and the board will stick to the bottom. Just put on these. It also doesn't have the weight pushing to the side, but overall it's pretty good. What we're going to do is just tighten it up. We got one on there, it should be good enough to hold it. What we'll do is once we got them in, just snug fit them. And you don't have to go too crazy hard. You got to be careful on what chip you're using too. I've seen where, I've even done it myself, where you go down real hard and all of a sudden you bend the PCB, and then all of a sudden memory doesn't work, or a bunch of other things don't work. So really the trick to overclocking is having a good proper cooling setup and making sure everything's running. I had a guy the other day come to me and be like, oh, temps are awful, I can't overclock, I'm trying to get 5 gig and I can't. And I'm like, well, 5 gigs should be pretty much an easy overclock on these new 9900Ks. I mean, it just depends on how much voltage, right? But I would probably say that pretty much all of them do it. I haven't seen really anyone that hasn't. A lot of the times it's because of your cooling. So you gotta be careful with cooling. If you're at like 4.7 and you're hitting 100 degrees Celsius with really low voltages, say 1.25, you probably have a problem with your cooler. So if you don't have your cooler right, then you can't overclock. So that's rule number 1 and step number 1, and why I'm going through this series, because if you don't have the cooler right, you won't be able to OC. So I'll get you that far. So look at that, pretty much done. Now the only thing we really got to do is obviously put memory in. I think we're going to start off with some Royals first, but plug in the power. Let's see, 8 down. Okay, so here's the pump one. We have a separate pump one. I know they have a separate one for CPU, and what we'll do is we'll connect, again, power for this one, because the Corsair pump itself needs power. We're going to ignore these ones. These are normally the fan connectors, but we're going to actually control them by the motherboard. We don't really need to do it by the Corsair, so we can keep that away. So what we do here is you have CPU fan over here. So what we'll do is we'll connect it to that. And that way, when we go through the BIOS, we can control everything through there. So, I mean, that's pretty it. Easy enough to install. We should probably get a pretty decent overclock with this, especially with the 3000 RPM fans. What I'll do is I'll put this all in the description below, so if you have one of these coolers, or remember these are 140 fans too, not 120. So these are pretty much the, I think at the time they were the fastest 140s that I can find. So just remember the 115i is a 140 fan setup, so you'd have to do these. What I'll do is I'll link the description, and I'll put them on Amazon, so that way if you want them, you can buy them too. I mean, this works really well, and it's not too hardcore where you gotta do all your piping. That will be in the coming up soon in our own new, I don't know if you want to call that a case mod or a bench mod. I haven't come up with a name for it yet, but it's one I'm going to use for all the water testing, and it's going to be kind of modular, so that way I can don't have, it's easy enough, so I don't have to fumble with bending pipe and doing anything like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this part, and stay tuned for the next one, which will be overclocking the CPU 5 gigs plus, and then memory overclocking. So I'll check you guys later. Slacker out.